Jake, honey, did you make it to Boston and meet up with your dad? I asked, excitement laced with trepidation as I clenched the phone tightly. Mom, come get me right now. Jake's trembling voice cut through the air. My heart sank. What happened? Did you see your dad? I pressed, trying to keep my voice steady. No, Mom. He's not here. A strange woman at his apartment says he doesn't live there. Jake's voice cracked. I grabbed my car keys. My mind was racing. Stay where you are, Jake. I'm on my way. As I sped toward the airport, my thoughts were a whirlwind. Ethan had promised he'd be there for Jake. He'd even sent plane tickets. What kind of sick joke was this? I saw Jake sitting on his suitcase, looking smaller and more fragile than ever. His eyes were red, his face a mask of fear. I'm so sorry, baby, I said, hugging him tightly. We'll figure this out. Jake's lip quivered. Why wasn't he there, Mom? Did I do something wrong? I clenched my jaw, words lodged in my throat. No, Jake, you didn't. The drive home was heavy with unspoken words. Jake stared out the window, lost in thought. I glanced at him every few moments, wishing I could wipe the confusion and hurt from his face. Back home, I tried to make things normal. How about we order a pizza, watch a movie? Jake shrugged. I guess. I dialed the number with one hand while sending a text with the other. Ethan had some explaining to do. When the pizza arrived, we picked an old favorite movie, The Familiar. It soothed some of the sting, but the silence between us buzzed with unanswered questions. Jake finally broke it. Do you think Dad even cares about us anymore? I looked straight into his eyes. Jake, your dad loves you. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes they can't explain. I felt a wave of anger and sorrow, but swallowed them down. After I tucked Jake into bed, I stepped into the living room, my phone gripped like a lifeline. I dialed Ethan's number. My fingers were trembling. Voicemail again. Ethan, it's Cassidy. Call me back. We need to talk about Jake. I hung up, frustration and worry wrestling inside me. The house was too quiet. Memories floated through my mind. Ethan and I, college sweethearts, young parents full of hope. How had we reached this point where my own son felt like a stranger to his father? A ping from my phone jolted me back, a message from Ethan. Finally, sorry, had a work emergency. Can't talk now. We'll call tomorrow. I wanted to smash the phone. Instead, I typed furiously, your work emergency left Jake stranded and scared. This isn't acceptable, Ethan. No reply. The next morning, Jake barely touched his breakfast. What's going to happen now, Mom? We're going to be okay, I said, more defiantly than I felt. Promise. As Jake headed off to school, I lingered at the door, the weight of my promise settling heavily on my shoulders. I had no choice but to unravel the mess Ethan had created, piece by piece, lie by lie, for Jake's sake and mine. The kitchen smelled of brewing coffee, its warmth a stark contrast to the chill that had settled in my veins since Jake's call. As I looked around, memories of Ethan filled the room. I could still see him making pancakes on Saturday mornings, all smiles and jokes. That was before everything changed. Ethan and I were college sweethearts, fiercely in love. We married right after graduation, ready to conquer the world together. When Jake was born, our lives felt complete. Ethan's eyes sparkled whenever he looked at Jake, and his laughter would fill our tiny apartment. One evening, after what felt like a never-ending day, Ethan came home bubbling with excitement. Cass, I've got an offer in Boston. It's a huge step up, a dream job. I tried to match his enthusiasm. That's amazing, Ethan, but what about us? He waved it off. It'll just be for a while. You and Jake can visit on weekends. We'll make it work. We did for a while. Ethan commuted back and forth. He'd read Jake bedtime stories over video calls and sent pictures of his new office. But gradually, the calls became less frequent, his visits sporadic. One particularly cold winter evening, around Jake's 6th birthday, Ethan called. I can't make it this weekend, Cass. Ethan, it's Jake's birthday, I interrupted, frustration leaking into my voice. I know, but it's just one birthday. There will be others. He didn't come. We blew out Jake's birthday candles alone. The empty chair at the table, a glaring void. Jake would ask, "Why isn't Dad here, Mom?" I'd force a smile. "He's busy, sweetheart. He loves you." But Ethan's absences grew longer. His promises of visits and video calls faded into silence. I handled Jake's questions, his increasing loneliness, and my own growing resentment as best as I could. I tried to believe Ethan's excuses, but it became impossible to ignore the truth staring at us every day. One time, during what was supposed to be a rare visit, Ethan spent most of the time on his phone, lost in work emails. "Can't you put that down for a minute?" I snapped, barely keeping my voice calm. He looked up, surprised. "Cass, come on. I'm doing this for us." "For us or for you?" Ethan's silence was more telling than any argument. I saw the growing distance in his eyes, his mind always somewhere else. Gradually, we stopped fighting, stopped talking, and he slipped out of our lives like a ghost. His once enthusiastic promises disintegrated into empty words. Jake's 10th birthday passed with just a card and an Amazon gift. The questions in his eyes were hard to answer, my reassurances feeling hollow. I realized then that this wasn't about us anymore. It was about protecting Jake from the growing void Ethan was leaving behind. And now, standing in my kitchen, clutching an empty mug, I felt sharper than ever. Ethan's betrayal wasn't just towards me. It was towards Jake. He had to face the consequences. It was time to stop making excuses and confront the reality of Ethan's choices for Jake's sake and mine. Every morning, the emptiness beside Jake's seat at the breakfast table felt like a silent accusation. One day, Jake stared down at his cereal, poking at the soggy loops. "Do you think Dad will call today?" he asked. I fought to keep my voice steady. "I hope so, Jake. He's just busy." Jake nodded, but didn't look convinced. As the days went by, I could see the shadows creeping into his eyes. Ethan's absence wasn't just felt. It was a presence that filled the house with its weight. School projects, soccer games, homework struggles. Ethan was missing them all. I knew it was affecting Jake, but what could I do? Each day became another brick in the wall of Ethan's absence. One evening, after getting busy in the kitchen, I dropped a plate. The crash made Jake rush in. "Are you okay, Mom?" I nodded, but my fist tightened. "It's just things aren't supposed to be like this, Jake. I know it's hard, but we'll get through it." Jake looked at me, his eyes more curious than hurt now. "Do you miss Dad?" I hesitated, then said what I miss is when he was around for us. Another birthday of Jake's came and went, and again, Ethan didn't call. We kept up traditions the best we could: balloons, cake, friends over for a small party. But Jake's eyes kept darting to his phone, waiting for a text or call that never came. "Maybe Dad's phone is broken," he suggested, trying to mask his disappointment. "Maybe," I said, forcing a smile, but inside it was boiling. Ethan's silence was more than insulting. It was cruel. He didn't have the decency to send more than a generic birthday text this year. No calls, no visit, nothing. The very night of Jake's birthday, after tucking him in bed, my phone buzzed. Ethan's name flashed on the screen. I picked up, gripping the device hard. "Hey, Cass." Ethan's voice was nonchalant, as if he hadn't missed the entire day. "I've been buried in work. Just called to say happy birthday to Jake." I bristled. "You missed it, Ethan." "Again. This is becoming a habit." He sighed. "I'm doing my best, Cass. My job's demanding, and Jake, he's demanding too. He needs his father." "Ethan, you've got to make more of an effort." "I'm tired of this, Cassidy. I'm out here working hard for us," I said. Really, because it felt like he was just doing it for himself? There was a long silence. Finally, he muttered, "Look, I'll call Jake tomorrow." "Okay, fine." I hung up, feeling more drained than ever. The sound of his lack of concern replayed in my head, along with Jake's hopeful face, waiting for his father's call. The next day, no call came. Jake took it quietly. "It's okay, Mom. Maybe next time." But it wasn't okay. Enough was enough. Ethan had to face what he was doing, and I had to protect Jake from more hurt. That evening, I reached out to Ryan. "I need your help, Ryan. It's about Ethan." Ryan's voice was firm. "Whatever you need, Cass. We'll get to the bottom of this." As he spoke, I felt a shift inside. A glimmer of determination sparked. This wasn't just about uncovering the truth about Ethan. It was about reclaiming our lives and making sure Jake knew that despite everything, he wasn't alone. On one warm summer evening, Jake came to me with a hopeful glint in his eyes. "Mom, can I go see Dad? Maybe for a few weeks during my break?" I hesitated. The idea of sending him back to Boston after everything made my stomach churn. But I saw the longing in Jake's eyes. He needed this. "All right, Jake. I'll call your dad and arrange it." I agreed, my voice steady despite my inner turmoil. The call to Ethan was surprisingly brief. "Jake wants to visit you for a few weeks," I said, half expecting an excuse. There was a pause, then Ethan replied, "Sure, send him over. I'll make time." The day Jake left, I couldn't shake the unease. His excitement was palpable, but my heart was heavy. We boarded the train together, and I watched his face light up as the scenery whisked by. When we arrived in Boston, I took a deep breath. "Call me the moment you meet your dad," I instructed Jake. "Promise," he said with a grin. I hugged him tightly before he headed toward the cab that would take him to Ethan's address. As I waved goodbye, I felt a pang of fear and hope mixed in an uneasy blend. Hours later, my phone buzzed. Jake's name flashed on the screen. "Mom," his voice quivered. "What's wrong? Jake? What's happening?" "He's not here." A lady opened the door, said he doesn't live at this address. His voice cracked. Tears stung my eyes. "Stay where you are. I'm coming." Racing back to Boston felt like a blur. When I arrived, Jake's tear-stained face greeted me, and I pulled him into an embrace. My anger simmered. At home, Jake's mood remained sullen. There was no pretending now. The illusion was shattered. I had to find out what was really going on with Ethan. I called Ryan the next day. "I need to know what Ethan's up to. Can you help me?" "Consider it done," Ryan replied without hesitation. Days stretched into weeks. Ryan's updates were brief but revealing. Ethan's got a new life in Boston, Cass. A woman named Veronica. They've been seen together a lot. I clenched the phone, forcing calm into my voice. "Thanks, Ryan. Keep digging." Jake's questions about his dad grew more insistent. "Why did Dad send me there if he wasn't going to be there?" I kept my voice gentle. "Sometimes people make bad choices, Jake. It's not your fault." One evening, Ryan called with a note of triumph. "I've got proof, Cass. Photos, documents, everything. Ethan's been lying to you both." Jake was asleep when I received the file from Ryan. Pictures of Ethan and Veronica, evidence of his betrayal. My hands trembled as the reality sunk in. Ethan had chosen his deception over his family. The next morning, I looked at Jake. His innocence was slipping away because of Ethan's lies. Something had to be done. "Mom, will we be okay?" Jake asked, his eyes wide and searching. I took a deep breath. "Yes, Jake. We'll be more than okay. We'll be better than before." Determination fueled my resolve. Ethan needed to face the consequences. It was time to take action, ensuring that he couldn't hurt us any longer. "Ryan," I called, my voice firm, "we're taking this to the next level. I want everyone to know who Ethan really is." Ryan didn't hesitate. "Let's do it, Cass. It's time for the truth to come out." As plans began to take shape, I felt a strange sense of peace. This was about more than revenge. It was about reclaiming our lives and showing Jake that no matter what, we would rise above Ethan's betrayal. As the days passed, I worked quietly and carefully, intent on keeping my plans concealed from Ethan. My interactions with Jake remained the focus, making sure he felt secure and loved amidst the storm brewing beneath the surface. One evening, after Jake had gone to bed, I sat down with Ryan in my living room. The evidence he had gathered lay spread out on the coffee table: photos, emails, documents. Each piece spelled out Ethan's betrayal in unwavering detail. "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" Ryan asked, his voice steady but concerned. I didn't waver. "Yes. He needs to understand the consequences, for Jake's sake." We devised a plan, carefully crafted and executed steps that would reveal Ethan's deceit to everyone he had managed to fool. I would play my part flawlessly, and Ryan would help ensure every detail was perfect. A few nights later, I called Ethan. "Hey, Ethan, it's Cassidy." He seemed surprised. "Cass, what's up?" I need to talk to you about Jake, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Okay, what about? Things have been tough lately. Jake's really missing you. Can we meet and talk this through? There was a pause. Sure, we can meet. When are you thinking? I'll be in Boston this weekend. How about we catch up then? He agreed, and we set a time. Hanging up, I felt a surge of resolve. This was the first step. Come Saturday, I arrived in Boston and met Ethan at a quiet cafe. As he approached, I noted how different he looked, the confidence in his stride marred by a hint of uncertainty. Hey, Cass, he greeted, a forced smile on his face. Ethan, I acknowledged, keeping my composure. Let's sit. As we settled at a table, I leaned forward. I want to understand why you left Jake waiting. He sighed, rubbing his temples. Cass, there's a lot going on. Work's been crazy. Things with Veronica? I cut in sharply. Veronica. So it's true. You've been living a double life. His face paled. How did you know? I have my ways, Ethan. You chose Veronica over your own son. He shifted uncomfortably. It's not like that, Cass. I never meant for it to go this far, but it did. Ethan, and Jake is the one suffering. The next step of our plan was simple. An anonymous email sent to Ethan's colleagues and friends, detailing his affair and neglect. The photos, the dates, the evidence, all laid bare. I wanted everyone to see the real Ethan, I continued sternly. Ethan, this isn't just about us anymore. You've hurt Jake, and he deserves better. Ethan's eyes darted nervously. What are you going to do? I met his gaze unwavering. You'll see. We parted ways, and as I headed home, I felt the weight of what was to come. The next morning, the fallout started. Messages and calls began to flood Ethan's phone. People demanding explanations, shocked and angered by the revelations. Jake noticed the tension, but remained blissfully unaware of the details. Mom, is everything okay? I smiled, ruffling his hair. Everything's fine, Jake. We're going to be just fine. Ethan's life began to crumble. The chaos became evident as he frantically tried to control the narrative. His carefully crafted image was shattering with each new confrontation. Ryan called me one evening, his voice laced with satisfaction. It's working, Cass. He's scrambling. Good, I responded, feeling a sense of justice. He needs to understand he broke his promises, and now he's facing the consequences. As the walls of Ethan's deceit closed in around him, I knew one thing was clear. The road to reclaiming our lives had well and truly begun, and with every step, the promise of a new beginning felt more real, more attainable for me and Jake. The fallout from the revelations spread like wildfire. Ethan's phone didn't stop buzzing, desperate texts from his colleagues, friends, and even superiors demanding explanations. His social media accounts were swarmed with shocked comments and angered reactions. I knew he was unraveling. The polished facade he maintained was cracking under the weight of his secrets. I felt a grim satisfaction in seeing the man who had once so confidently brushed everything aside now scrambling to contain his crumbling world. A few days later, I got a call from Ryan. Ethan's been calling me, he said. Cass, he's panicking. Good, I replied coolly. He deserves every bit of it. That evening, as I was preparing dinner, my phone rang. I glanced at the screen. Ethan. I took a deep breath and answered. Cassidy, what the hell did you do? Ethan's voice was frantic and accusing. I exposed the truth, Ethan. People deserve to know who you really are. You've ruined me, he spat, his anger seething through the line. My career, my reputation, everything's falling apart. I contained my composure. You did this to yourself, Ethan. You chose to lie. You chose to abandon Jake. There was silence on his end, the weight of my words sinking in. I never meant for things to get so out of hand, he finally said, his voice softer, almost pleading. The time for excuses is over, Ethan. You can't undo what you've done, and now you face the consequences. In the days that followed, Ethan's desperation grew. He appeared at our doorstep one evening, looking disheveled and hollow-eyed. It was the first face-to-face confrontation since everything had come to light. Cass, please, Ethan's voice cracked as he stood on the porch. We need to talk. I didn't invite him in, keeping the door slightly ajar. What is there to talk about, Ethan? I need you to help me fix this. For Jake's sake, he pleaded. For Jake's sake, I scoffed. Where was that concern when you were making promises you never kept and living a double life? Jake deserves better than empty apologies. Ethan ran his fingers through his hair, looking defeated. I'm sorry, Cass. Truly, I am. But this is destroying me. I'm losing everything. And what about Jake? I replied sharply. He's lost his trust in his father. He's lost evenings crying himself to sleep, wondering why you didn't care enough to be there for him. Ethan fell silent, guilt and regret etched across his face. He had no rebuttal because he knew it was all true. You start by facing the reality of your actions, Ethan. You can't run from this, and you can't expect me to fix it for you. He nodded, defeated. I just want to make things right. I sighed, my resolve unwavering. You've got a long way to go, and it starts with taking responsibility. Until then, there's nothing more to discuss. Ethan stumbled back, a shadow of the man he once was. I closed the door and leaned against it, feeling a mix of relief and sadness. Mom, who was that? Jake's voice called from the living room. Just someone we don't need to worry about anymore, I said, walking over to join him. The fight wasn't over, but the tide was turning. Ethan's crumbling world was bittersweet. Justice. Now it was time to focus on rebuilding our lives, making sure those painful lessons weren't in vain for Jake's sake and for mine. Ethan's unexpected visit became a turning point. Days passed, and I noticed a quietness settle into the house. A kind of calm that made me realize how much tension we'd been living under. It was like we could breathe again. But one evening, the doorbell rang sharply. Ethan again, standing on the porch looking desperate. I stepped out to speak with him, making sure Jake was inside and couldn't hear the conversation. Cassidy, please, he began, his voice breaking. I've lost my job. Veronica left. Everything's falling apart. You built your life on lies, Ethan. Did you think there'd be no repercussions? I replied, my tone unyielding. I understand that now. I'm dealing with it, but I want another chance with you and Jake. I scoffed, barely restraining my anger. Another chance after everything you've put us through? It's too late, Ethan. My voice was steady. We've moved on. You should too. He ran a hand through his hair, pleading eyes meeting mine. You can't just shut me out, Cass. I'm still Jake's father. A father who abandoned him, I said. You have to earn his trust back and mine, but don't expect us to forget or forgive easily. Ethan swallowed hard, nodding. I know, but I'm trying. Cass, I'm trying to be better. You should have thought about being better years ago when you left us, I said, turning away from him. The hurt and anger from years of broken promises boiled under my skin. Inside, I found Jake sitting silently, sensing something was off. Everything okay, Mom? Everything's fine, Jake, I assured him, ruffling his hair. Just dealing with some old issues. One afternoon, Ryan dropped by to check on us. How are you holding up, Cass? We're managing, one step at a time. I can see the changes. You seem lighter. I think Ethan's finally getting what he deserves, I said with a small, tight smile. Ryan nodded, a look of agreement in his eyes. It's about time. The days continued to pass, and each one brought a little more peace. We focused on creating new memories, simple things like movie nights, baking cookies, and laughter. I could see Jake slowly coming back to life, the shadows lifting from his eyes. One evening, as we were finishing dinner, Jake looked up at me. Mom, do you think Dad will ever change? I don't know, Jake. People can change, but they have to really want to. Do you think he wants to? I considered my answer carefully. I think he's starting to realize he needs to, but it's a long road, and he has to walk it himself. Jake seemed to accept this, nodding thoughtfully. As long as we're okay, that's what matters, right? Exactly, Jake. And we are okay. We're better than okay. It wasn't easy, but each day felt like a step toward reclaiming our lives. Ethan's downfall was a necessary storm that cleared the path for a brighter, more honest future. We might have been forced into the chaos, but coming out of it, we were stronger and closer than ever. As I tucked Jake in that night, I felt a sense of closure. The cycle of deceit and hurt that Ethan had spun around us was finally breaking. We were stepping into a new chapter, one where trust, love, and resilience were the strongest foundations. Ethan didn't show up unannounced at our door again. The chaos he left in his wake was slowly settling. Instead, I received sporadic emails and texts, attempts to reach out and rebuild bridges that had long been burned. I kept my responses brief and focused on Jake. Ethan needed to see that his road to redemption was not with me, but with his son. One Saturday, as I was tending to the garden, a car pulled up in front of the house. Ethan stepped out, looking more tired and worn than ever. Jake was playing basketball in the driveway when he noticed. "Dad," he said, his voice tinged with a mix of confusion and hope. "Hey, champ," Ethan called softly. "Can we talk?" I wiped my hands on my jeans and walked over. "What are you doing here, Ethan?" "I wanted to see Jake, to talk things out," he replied, his voice devoid of the bravado that once carried. Jake turned to me, seeking permission. I nodded. "It's your choice, Jake." They sat on the porch steps while I kept my distance, hearing snippets of their conversation. "I've missed so much," Ethan began. "Why did you leave us, Dad?" Jake's voice cracked with long-held pain. Ethan took a deep breath, struggling to find the right words. "I thought I was following my dreams, but I got lost. I failed you, and I'm sorry." Jake was quiet, absorbing his father's words. "It hurt, Dad. It hurts knowing you chose someone else over us." Ethan's head dropped. "I know, and I hate myself for that. I want to make things right. Jake, I want to be there for you." The simplicity of their exchange held more weight than any grand gesture could. Ethan's words were raw, stripped of excuses. For the first time, he seemed genuinely remorseful. After their talk, Ethan approached me cautiously. "Cass, thank you for letting me see him. I know I don't deserve it." I maintained a measured expression. "It's not about you, Ethan. It's about what's best for Jake." He nodded, gratitude in his eyes. "I understand. If there's any chance of rebuilding trust, I want to take it, even if it means starting from scratch." "Actions speak louder than words," I said plainly. "Ethan, Jake's old enough to see the truth for himself." As Ethan left, I felt something shift. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a step in the right direction for Jake. Months rolled by, and Ethan's efforts became more consistent. He showed up to Jake's games, helped with his school projects, and gradually, the strained, awkward exchanges turned into genuine conversations. One evening, Ryan dropped by for dinner. "How are things with Ethan?" he asked, while helping me set the table. "He's trying, and Jake's responding." "That's what matters," I said, a small smile playing on my lips. "You did good, Cass. It's not easy, but you've handled it with grace," he replied. "Thanks, Ryan. I've had a lot of help along the way." As the night wore on and Jake excused himself to bed, Ryan and I sat on the porch, enjoying a quiet moment. "He really looks up to you, you know," Ryan said, gazing at the stars. "I can only hope to be the mother he deserves," I replied softly. "You are, and more." In that moment, the weight of the past felt lighter. Ethan's betrayal had carved deep wounds, but the strength and resilience we found were more profound. Ethan's downfall had been a catalyst. Our lives couldn't stay the same, but the upheaval allowed us to rebuild on new terms, stronger, more honest ones. I looked at Jake, now deeply engrossed in a book, and felt an overwhelming sense of pride. We had come far, not just in miles, but in heart. Our journey was one of resilience and healing, of reclaiming what was rightfully ours. The storm had passed, and the horizon looked brighter than ever.